the disturbed night. The night Haman erected the cross for Mordecai was the first night of Passover, the very night miracles without number have been done for the fathers and for Israel. But this time, the night of joy was changed into a night of grieving and tears. Wherever there were Jews, they passed the night weeping and lamenting. The night was especially terrifying for Mordecai, because his own people accused him of having provoked their misfortunes by his haughty behavior toward Haman. Excitement and consternation reigned in heaven as well as on earth. When Haman was satisfied that the cross intended for his enemy was properly constructed, he went to the Bet HaMidrash, where he found Mordecai and all the Jewish schoolchildren, 22,000 in number, in tears and sorrow. He ordered them to be put in chains, saying, "First I will kill off these, and then I will hang Mordecai." The mothers came with bread and water, coaxing their children to take something before encountering death. The children, however, laid their hands on their books and said, "As our teacher Mordecai lives, we will neither eat nor drink, but will die exhausted with fasting." They rolled up their sacred scrolls and handed them to the teachers with the words, "For our devotion to the study of the Torah, we had hoped to be rewarded with long life, according to the promises held in the Holy Scriptures. But as we are not worthy, remove the books." The outcries of the children, teachers, and mothers, united with the supplications of the fathers, reached heaven in the third hour of the night, and God said, "I hear the voice of tender lambs and sheep." Moses arose and addressed God, "You know well that the voices are not of lambs and sheep, but of the young of Israel, who for 3 days have been fasting and languishing in chains, only to be slaughtered for the delight of the arch-enemy." Then God felt compassion with Israel for the sake of his innocent little ones. He broke the seal with which the heavenly decree of annihilation had been fastened, and tore the decree itself in pieces. From this moment Ahasuerus became restless, for God sent down Michael to remove sleep from the king. Then Gabriel descended and threw the king out of his bed to the floor, no less than 365 times, continually whispering in his ear, "You ingrate, reward him who deserves to be rewarded." Because of his sleeplessness, Ahasuerus thought he might have been poisoned, and was about to order the execution of those who prepared his food. But they succeeded in convincing him of their innocence, by calling his attention to the fact that Esther and Haman had shared the evening meal with him, yet they felt no unpleasant effects. Then suspicions against his wife and Haman began to trouble his mind. Remembering Esther's flattery of Haman, he accused them inwardly of having conspired together to put him out of the way. He tried to banish this thought with the reflection that if a conspiracy had existed against him, his friends would have warned him. But these reflections brought others. Did he have any friends? Was it possible that by leaving valuable services unrewarded, he had forfeited friendly feelings? He therefore commanded that the Chronicles of the Kings be read to him. He would compare his own acts with those of his predecessors and try to find out whether he might count on friends. What was read to him did not restore his tranquility of mind, for he saw a poor man, none other than the angel Michael, who repeatedly said to him, "Haman wants to kill you and become king himself. Let this serve as proof that I am telling you the truth. Early in the morning he will appear before you and request permission to kill Mordecai, who once saved your life. And when you ask him what honor should be done for the king's favorite, he will ask to be given the apparel, the crown, and the horse of the king as signs of distinction." The king then had the Chronicles read, and his anxiety was soothed only when hearing the passage describing the loyalty of Mordecai. Had the wishes of the reader held sway, Ahasuerus would never have heard this entry, for it was the son of Haman who was doing the reading, and he passed this part in silence. But a miracle occurred. Though he did not read these words, they were heard. The names of Mordecai and Israel had a quieting effect on the king, and he fell asleep. He dreamed that Haman, sword in hand, was approaching him with evil intent. Early that morning, Haman, without being announced, suddenly entered the antechamber and awoke the king. Ahasuerus then knew the truth of his dream. The king was still further convinced against Haman when he asked him how to honor the king's favorite. Believing himself to be the object of the king's question, he advised the king to have his favorite arrayed in the king's coronation garments and put the royal crown on his head. One of the grandees was to run before him, proclaiming that whoever did not prostrate himself before the king's favorite would have his head cut off and his house given over to pillage. Haman was quick to notice he made a mistake, for he saw the king's countenance change color at the mention of the word crown. He took care not to refer to the crown again. In spite of this precaution, the king saw in the words of Haman a striking verification of his vision. He was now confident that Haman had designs against his life and his throne. The fall of Haman. Haman was soon to find out he had gone far afield in supposing himself to be the man the king wanted to honor. The king's command to Haman was this: "Go to the royal chambers, fetch a coat of fine purple, a shirt of delicate silk, decorated with golden bells, diamonds, and pearls. Also the large golden crown from Macedonia I wore on the day I ascended the throne. Also the sword and coat of mail from Ethiopia, and the 2 veils embroidered with pearls from Africa. Then go to the royal stables and bring the black horse I used at my coronation. Go with all these and find Mordecai." Haman: "Which Mordecai?" The king: "Mordecai the Jew." Haman: "There are many Jews named Mordecai." The king: "The Jew Mordecai who sits at the king's gate." Haman: "There are many royal gates. Which do you mean?" The king: "The gate that leads from the harem to the palace." Haman: "That man is my enemy, and the enemy of my house. I would rather give him 10,000 silver talents than honor him." The king: 10,000 talents of silver will be given to him, and he will be made lord over your house. But you must show him this honor." Haman: "I have 10 sons. I would rather have them run before his horse than for myself to do him this honor." The king: "You, your sons, and your wife will be slaves to Mordecai, but you must show him this honor." "My lord and king, Mordecai is a common man. Appoint him to be ruler over a city, or even over a district, rather than I do him this honor." The king: "I will appoint him over cities and districts. All the kings on land and water will pay him obedience, but you must show him this honor." Haman: "Rather have coin struck bearing your name together with his, instead of mine as before. Then I should do him this honor." The king: "The man who saved the life of the king deserves to have his name put on the coin of the realm. Nevertheless, these honors you must show him." Haman: "Edicts and writings have been issued to all parts of the kingdom, commanding that the Jews be destroyed. Recall them rather than I should do him this honor." The king: "The edicts and writings will be recalled. Yet these honors you must show Mordecai." Seeing that all petitions and entreaties were ineffectual, and Ahasuerus insisted on the execution of his order, Haman went to the royal treasure chambers, walking with his head bowed down like a mourner's, his ears hanging down, his eyes dim, his mouth twisted up, his heart hardened, his bowels cut in pieces, his loins weakened, and his knees knocking against each other. He gathered together the royal insignia and took them to Mordecai, accompanied by Harbona and Abzur, who, at the order of the king, were to make sure Haman carried out his wishes to the letter. When Mordecai saw his enemy approach, he thought his last moment had come. He urged his pupils to flee, that they might not share his fate. But they refused, saying, "In death as in life, we are with you." With the few moments Mordecai thought left to him, he spent in devotion. He wanted to die with words of prayer on his lips. Ignored by Mordecai, Haman had to address his pupils. "What was the last subject taught you by your teacher Mordecai?" They told him they had been discussing the law of the Omer, the sacrifice brought on this very day as long as the temple had stood. At his request, they described some of the details of the ceremony in the temple connected with the offerings. He exclaimed, "You can be happy that your 10 farthings offered for wheat produced a better effect than the 10,000 talents of silver I offered the king for the destruction of the Jews." Meanwhile, Mordecai had finished his prayer. Haman stepped up to him and said, "Arise, you son of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Your sackcloth and ashes availed more than my 10,000 talents of silver I promised to the king. They were not accepted, but your prayers were accepted by your Father in heaven." Mordecai, not yet over the idea Haman had come to take him to the cross, requested the grace of a few minutes for his last meal. But Haman's repeated protests assured him he was not about to die. When Haman set about arraying him with the royal apparel, Mordecai refused until he had bathed and dressed his hair. Royal apparel did not fit his condition after 3 days of sackcloth and ashes. As luck would have it, Esther had issued the command that the bathkeepers and barbers were not to ply their trades that day, so there was nothing for Haman to do but perform the menial services Mordecai required. Haman then tried to play on the feelings of Mordecai. Fetching a deep sigh, he said, "I, the great one in the king's realm, now act as bathkeeper and barber." Mordecai, however, did not permit himself to be imposed on. He knew Haman's origin too well to be deceived. He remembered his father had been a bathkeeper and barber in a village. Haman's humiliation was not yet complete. Mordecai, exhausted by his 3-day fast, was too weak to mount his horse unaided. Haman had to serve him as a footstool, and Mordecai took the opportunity to give him a kick, you know where. Haman reminded him of the scriptural verse, "Rejoice not when your enemy falls, and let not your heart be glad when he is overthrown." Mordecai, however, refused to apply this verse to himself, for he was chastising not a personal enemy, but the enemy of his people, and of such it says in the Scriptures, "And you will tread on the high places of your enemies." Finally, Haman had Mordecai ride through the streets and proclaimed before him, "Thus will be done to the man the king delights to honor." In front of them marched 27,000 youths, detailed for this service from the court, and they too made the same proclamation. The procession was swelled by the Jews. They, however, made a proclamation of a different tenor. "Thus will be done to the man whose honor is celebrated by the King of heaven and earth." As he rode along, Mordecai gave praise to God. "I will extol you, O Lord, for you have raised me up, and not let my foes rejoice over me. O Lord my God, I cried to you, and you healed me. You brought my soul up from Sheol. You kept me alive." Then his pupils joined in with, "Sing praise to the Lord, O you saints, and give thanks to his holy name. For his anger is but for a moment. Weeping may last the night, but joy comes in the morning." Haman added the verse, "As for me, I said in my prosperity I will never be moved. The God of the Jews has made my mountain crumble." Queen Esther added, "I cried to you, O Lord, and to you I made supplications. Praise the holy name of the Lord." And the whole concourse of Jews cried out, "You have turned my grieving into dancing. You shook off my sackcloth and clothed me with gladness, so I may sing praise to you, and not be dead and silent." There was indeed dancing in the streets. When the procession passed the house of Haman, his daughter was looking out the window. She took the man on the horse to be her father, and the leader of it, Mordecai. Raising a vessel filled with offal, she emptied it over the leader, her own father. Scarcely had the vessel left her hand when she realized the truth. She threw herself from the window and lay dead, crushed on the street. In spite of the sudden change in his fortunes, Mordecai ended the eventful day as he had begun it, in prayer and fasting. No sooner was the procession over than he put off the royal robes and again covered himself with sackcloth. Then he prayed until night. Haman was plunged in grieving, partly on account of his deep disgrace, and partly because of the death of his daughter. Neither his wife nor his friends could advise him how to mend his sad fortunes. They could only offer sorry consolation. If this Mordecai is the seed of the saints, you cannot prevail against him. You will surely encounter the same fate as the kings in their battle with Abraham, and Abimelech with his quarrel with Isaac. As Jacob was victorious over the angel he wrestled, and Moses and Aaron caused the drowning of Pharaoh, so Mordecai has overcome you. While they were still talking, the king's bailiffs came and brutally carried Haman off to the banquet Esther had prepared, to prevent him and his sons from plotting against the king. Ahasuerus repeated his promise to give Esther whatever she desired, always expecting the restoration of the temple. This time, casting her eyes heavenward, Esther replied, "If I have found favor in your sight, O supreme king, and if it please you, O king of the world, let my life be spared, and let my people be rescued out of the hands of its enemy." Ahasuerus, thinking these words were addressed to him, asked in irritation, "Who is he, and where is he, this evil one, who thought to kill you and your people?" Esther pointed to the man who had tried to take her life, as he actually had taken Vashti's. But in the excitement of the moment, she pointed to the king. Fortunately, the king did not observe her error, because an angel guided her hand instantaneously in the direction of Haman, and she said, "This is the adversary and enemy, he who wanted to murder you in your sleep, who this very day wanted to array himself in royal apparel, ride on your horse, and wear the golden crown. He wanted to destroy my people, and therefore me. But God set his undertaking to nothing, and the honors he sought for himself fell to my uncle, Mordecai, who he wanted to hang." The king's anger burned fiercely, and to infuriate him still more, God sent 10 angels in the guise of Haman's sons to cut down the trees in the royal park. When Ahasuerus turned his eyes towards the park, he saw the ruthless destruction, and in his rage went out to the garden. This was the instant utilized by Haman to implore grace for himself from Esther. Gabriel intervened, and threw Haman on the couch in a posture as though he were about to do violence to the queen. At that moment Ahasuerus reappeared. Enraged beyond description by what he saw, he cried out, "Haman assaults the honor of the queen in my very presence. Come then, you peoples, nations, and races, and pronounce judgment over him." When Harbona, originally a friend of Haman and an adversary of Mordecai, heard the king's anger, he said to him, "Nor is this the only crime committed by Haman against you, for he was an accomplice of Bigthan and Teresh, and his hatred to Mordecai dates back to the time when Mordecai uncovered their foul plots. Out of revenge, he has erected a cross for him." Harbona's words illustrate the saying, "Once the ox has been cast to the ground, slaughtering knives can easily be found." Knowing that Haman had fallen from his high place, Harbona was intent on winning the friendship of Mordecai. Harbona was altogether right, for the king at once ordered Haman to be hanged. Mordecai was charged with the execution, and Haman's tears and entreaties did not in the least move him. He insisted on hanging him like the commonest of criminals, instead of executing him with the sword, the mode of punishment applied to men of rank. The cross Haman had erected for Mordecai was now used for himself. It was made of wood from a thorn bush, fit to do this service, for the ungodly are like thorns. The cross was tall enough for Haman and his 10 sons to be hanged on it. It was planted 3 cubits deep. Each of the victims required 3 cubits space in length, and 1 cubit was left vacant between the feet of the one above and the head of the one below. And the youngest son had his feet 4 cubits from the ground as he hung. Besides these 10 sons, who had been governors in various provinces, Haman had 20 others, 10 of whom died, and the other 10 were reduced to beggary. Haman's vast fortune was divided into 3 parts. The first part was given to Mordecai and Esther, the second to the students of the Torah, and the third was applied to the restoration of the temple. Mordecai thus became a wealthy man. He was also set up as king of the Jews. As such, he had coins struck, which bore the figure of Esther on one side and his own on the reverse. However, the measure Mordecai gained in worldly power, he lost spiritually, because the business connected with his high political station left him no time for the study of the Torah. Previously, he had ranked 6th among the eminent scholars of Israel. Now he dropped to 7th. Ahasuerus, on the other hand, was the winner by the change. As soon as Mordecai entered the office of Grand Chancellor, he succeeded in subjecting the provinces that had revolted on account of Vashti's execution. The Edict of the King. The edict issued against the Jews was revoked by Ahasuerus in the following terms. Ahasuerus sends this letter to all inhabitants of water and earth, to all the rulers of districts, and to the generals of the army who dwell in every country. May your peace be great. I write this to inform you I am not proud of my power, but will walk in lowliness of spirit all my days, in order to provide you great peace. To all who dwell under my dominion, to all who carry on business, to all who export goods from one nation to the other, I am the same. And none may seek to cause trouble on land or sea, or between one people and another. I write this because in spite of our sincerity and honesty, there were nevertheless people who were near king and government that misled the king and wrote letters which are not right before heaven, are evil before men, and harmful to the empire. This was the petition they requested from the king, that righteous men be killed and innocent blood shed. Such righteous people as Esther, celebrated for all virtues, and Mordecai, wise in every branch of wisdom. I thought I was condemning an evil nation and did not know it was the Jews, who are called the children of the Lord of all, who created heaven and earth, and who led them and their fathers through great and mighty empires. And now, as he, Haman, a descendant of Amalek, who enjoyed much kindness, praise, and dignity from us, did not know how to appreciate the dignity, but harbored thoughts to kill the king, was ordered to be hanged. And all his evil plans have been brought to nothing, as the Creator of heaven and earth brought his machinations down on his own head. So says Ahasuerus, king of Persia. As a memorial to the wonderful deliverance from the hands of Haman, the Jews celebrated the day their archenemy had appointed for their extermination. Yet the sages refused at first to make it a festival for all times, lest the hatred of the heathen be excited against the Jews. They yielded only after Esther pointed out to them that the events which the holiday was based on were also noted in the annals of the kings of Persia and Media, and thus the outside world could enjoy the success of the Jews, for when the righteous succeed, it is a profit to all. Esther addressed one other petition to the sages. She begged that the book containing her history be incorporated in the Holy Scriptures. They again refused, because they shrank from adding anything to the canon, consisting of the Torah and the prophets. But again they had to yield to Esther's argument. She quoted the words from Exodus, "Write this for a memorial in a book," which was spoken by Moses to Joshua after the battle of Rephidim with the Amalekites. They then saw that it was the will of God to immortalize the warfare waged with the Amalekite Haman. Nor is the book of Esther an ordinary history. Without the aid of the Holy Spirit, it could not have been composed, and therefore a canonization decided on earth was endorsed in the heavenly council. And as the book of Esther was now an indestructible part of the Holy Scriptures, so the Feast of Purim will be celebrated forever, now and in the future world. and Esther herself, by her pious deeds, acquired a good name both in this world and in the world to come. The End. The Legends of the Jews, Section 95 of 95. TheLegendsOfTheJews.com.